Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be talking about the recent Maccabi Tel Aviv hooligan violence in Holland on the backdrop of the recent ICC arrest warrants that were issued by The Hague. And we'll be bringing in a bit of Islam. You know, does Islam have a place in Dutch society and wider European society? But first, let's jump into our first clip for today.
This man wants a ban on the Quran and to shut down all mosques, and he could be about to lead the Netherlands. He's been called the king of Islamophobia by critics, but far-right Geert Wilders won the most votes in the Dutch general election and immediately promised to cut immigration and what he called the asylum tsunami. He's anti-Islam and he's anti-migration, and it's a complete shift to the right for the country. His election pledges also included plans for Dexit, a referendum on the Netherlands leaving the EU. But it's his comments on Islam that have been the most controversial, saying he wants a de-Islamization of the Netherlands and no mosques and no Islamic schools in the country.
Okay, so that was obviously Geert Wilders. That was mentioned in the video, the new leader, I suppose, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail. I think the elections in Holland received a lot of media attention, especially in the UK, of people who are following it. But first, if I can first start off with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, just for the benefit of our viewers?
Jazakallah for having me. I'm currently a medical student in Amsterdam, so I'm studying medicine. And currently I'm in the UK for a while doing my minor in politics and philosophy. And yeah, it's very, very good to be here to talk about this.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you're Dutch, so you grew up, born in Holland. Yes. And things as well. Tell us a bit about the outreach work that you do in Holland in general.
Yeah, so I've been quite active in the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, doing different lectures about Islam throughout the country. With our Women's Student Association, I organize some lectures about women in Islam, and before that also the history of Islam in Europe. So yeah, that's what I try to do.
Okay, interesting. Is that well received, do you think, by like Dutch people in general, or like do you get a wider audience? Is there interest in those kind of talks?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a struggle to get people to listen to this voice.
Yeah.
That Islam is integral to Europe. But I think it's definitely our place as well to raise awareness about this topic, because I think it could really help with the whole cultural debate about Islam in Europe.
Yes,
as well.
Yes, which we'll go into a bit more detail a bit later. Okay, interesting. So in terms of like the recent ICC arrest warrants that were issued for Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, I find like, obviously, there was a lot of violence in terms of the Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans. There was a lot of media coverage, and the UK did watch a lot of that. Actually, it was covered quite well, I thought, in the UK. But I found it, like, given all the violence that happened then, how quickly Netanyahu responded to even just the small kind of reports. There wasn't very much information at the time that seemed to be readily available, and it seemed to be a bit of a coincidence that he suddenly like jumped out as soon as any kind of violence seemed to have been seen on the streets.
So what happened on the night is that we know that the Maccabi supporters, they instigated the violence. And quite quickly after the violence happened, Netanyahu, Biden, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was in Amsterdam. So quite a few influential people on this quite hot topic were involved. And it was quite quickly framed as the people from Amsterdam actually attacking the Jewish supporters. So it was quite quickly framed as a Jew hunt, and that it was specifically anti-Semitic sort of framework in which the people from Amsterdam operated. And what's interesting about that as well is that because many of these people from Amsterdam are from Moroccan descent or are Muslim, that was really quickly a big topic in the debate as well. We saw that in a few hours there was a huge media hype about this, where we didn't have a lot of facts about what really happened. We didn't have a lot of facts about how bad everything was. However, there were a lot of conclusions formed
very quickly.
Hours after everything happened.
Yeah, I completely agree. It was just, it was out of the blue. Like, it was everywhere. It was completely different in different news outlets. Obviously, you can hear the very different headline on Al Jazeera than BBC and other news outlets in Netherlands. So it was very, I think, subjective in terms of what you thought, and it was within hours of obviously what has happened on the street. And when the footage has come out, it was obviously a completely different picture for everyone, and the truth was coming to the surface as well.
We know that the Maccabi Tel Aviv team has been interlinked with the IDF and the Israeli government. So it's quite interesting that they come to play in Amsterdam, they instigate violence, and then quite quickly after that, there's a whole political shift in the debate in Holland, but there's also a whole shift in the way that there is talk about the ICC. So where first, Holland was quite compliant with the ICC, and we are the host country of the ICC, so it should be a given.
The Hague is in Holland.
Exactly, it should be a given that we respect the decisions made by the ICC. So what we saw is that at first we were in support of the warrants, but now yesterday the PM said that we are going to look into options to host Netanyahu without any issues. So that's quite the U-turn that he made.
I mean, it's difficult. You can't really have this discussion without bringing in Geert Wilders, which is the man who we watched on the video, who was kind of the popular party that he was leader of was voted in. But as I understand in our discussions, there's actually a coalition now within Holland. So he's not technically the leader, Geert Wilders, of Holland. Is that right? Can you tell me a bit, just clarify that a little bit more?
So essentially, he won the election, so he became the biggest party in parliament. But because we need to form coalitions and the coalition needs to approve the PM, he didn't get to have the PM post. So now he's the leader of the largest party, but he selected, the coalition selected sort of independent PM, which basically became the voice of the cabinet.
Okay.
So that's sort of what happened and how Dutch politics kind of work.
Okay.
So yeah, he still has a really strong voice in Dutch debate, of course, because he's the leader of the largest party, and he's probably, currently in the polls, he's rising as well. But he's not the leader of the Netherlands.
He didn't have enough votes to become the prime minister, so that's why he wants to form coalitions.
Yeah, so he does not have an absolute majority in parliament, so they need to form a coalition anyways, and that's quite typical in Holland. We don't really get absolute majorities.
I see.
Because we have quite a few parties. So we always form coalitions, and then usually, traditionally, it is that the leader of the largest party in the coalition becomes the PM. But in this case, because Wilders was such a controversial person, they chose an independent PM.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And how is it, do you feel, in the run up to the elections that he gained so much popularity with his anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, anti-immigration stance and anti-EU stance generally?
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely a story that has been told from early 2000s, maybe even before that. That Muslims or immigrants get framed for quite a few issues in Holland, and I think this is an issue in broader in Europe that migrants get blamed for quite a few things. So he established his party in 2006, and then after that he became really known for his anti-Islam standpoints, of course. But when the cabinet fell in 2022. That's when he really rose in popularity, because what he did is he made his stances on Islam a bit milder. So he became known as the sort of moderate when it came to Islam, which was quite interesting because he never said that he took anything back. He just said that his current focus is on different issues in Dutch politics.
Okay.
So for instance, his stance on Quran and mosques, essentially what he said is that we're not going to imply that immediately if I gain power.
Okay, fine.
So he gained this sort of image of being a bit more moderate on these issues, which led to other parties which first excluded him. So they said that even if he did win, we wouldn't like work with him in coalition. So now they sort of opened that door, which basically led to him rising popularity more and gaining the most seats in parliament. So that's
Okay, I see. And what has been the response generally in terms of the recent Maccabi hooligan violence from those leaders who are seen to be far right? And there's been quite a lot of gain from the far right politicians generally in Europe in recent times with recent elections, arguably. So what has been his or their response to the Maccabi violence? And we'll jump into the next video in a minute, but before we jump in there, what was his response to them?
So his response was to blame the Muslims again.
Of course, yeah.
So that's like his big thing. So we didn't really expect anything else.
Yes.
That he basically immediately jumped on this bandwagon of Muslims are to blame for everything, and Islam specifically is to blame for anti-Semitism in Holland right now, because many of these people, that were in the riots, they were of Moroccan descent. So this whole thing was made up pretty much that Moroccans or Muslims are fundamentally anti-Semitic, and that was he really was quite strong in this debate. That he said that, this is a Jew hunt, this is a pogrom, which are quite intense words to use. Knowing Western history.
Hooligans or fights in the street.
Yes, and there were like really little facts about what really happened. And something we did know is that Maccabi instigated the violence. So it wasn't like these were, the local Jewish communities or anything like that. But he was quite strong in immediately saying that, well, you see what I've been saying for 20 years, that Islam is incompatible with Holland, and Muslims shouldn't practice Islam in Holland. You now see the result of this. That was sort of his big thing. Of like, I told you so.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Let's jump to the next clip, which shows a Dutch politician kind of talking about the hooligan violence and the Maccabi Tel Aviv football fans as well.
Voorzitter, als mensen worden aangesproken op het feit dat ze Joods zijn, is dat verschrikkelijk en moet dat aangepakt worden. En de uitspraken die we in de afgelopen dagen hoorden, zoals kankerjood en we gaan op jodenjacht, dat kan niet, dat mag niet en dat moeten we afkeuren. Antisemitisme is in alle vormen verschrikkelijk en moet bestreden worden. Hoe het zich ook uit, in woorden of in daden. Er is in Nederland geen plek voor haat. Het is terecht dat we in Nederland een discussie voeren over discriminatie en haat in onze samenleving. Maar die strijd tegen discriminatie wordt echter zwak als je selectief shopt in welke vormen van discriminatie je wil aanpakken. Het debat wordt ongeloofwaardig als vormen van discriminatie en haat doodgezwegen worden en gebagatelliseerd. Want de afgelopen dagen werd Amsterdam geterroriseerd door genocideverheerlijkers die dachten dat ze als een soort kolonisten Amsterdam onveilig konden maken. En dit Maccabi-tuig op genocideverlof kon vrijwel ongestoord huishouden. Terwijl de meerderheid van Amsterdam de pijn voelt van de totale vernietiging van Gaza en de door de Nederlandse regering gesteunde genocide, liep de bende Maccabi-tuig door de stad en scandeerde: fuck de Arabieren, er is geen school meer in Gaza, want er zijn geen kinderen meer. Racisme en genocideverheerlijking, het lachen om vermoorde kinderen terwijl de politie meekeek.
So, I mean, I know that the kind of violence surrounding that football match that happened has kind of blown over a bit more now. But the wider discussion about Islam integrating, Muslims integrating into wider society in Holland is something that, keeps going, and it just kind of flares up whenever these things kind of happen. So since then, how much has that incident happened, with the violence? How much has that really impacted Dutch society going forward, do you feel?
Well, I think, again, this is a debate of like decades, really, about Muslims integrating into Dutch society. But because we have such a right-wing cabinet now, you can see and you can feel that it has been much more normalized to speak about Muslims being fundamentally anti-Western or not compatible with the West. So that's quite interesting to see, that we're at first there, like we we're quite a careful society, and you know the Dutch are known for their tolerance and stuff.
Yeah.
And now that's really coming to the forefront, where because in politics it's such a big debate now, and you know the PM, but also different ministers of the cabinet, they stated that Islamic groups have fundamental issues integrating into Dutch society, and we need to do something about this. So you can feel that mirroring that will definitely mirror in society as well if these people were voted in power.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, I also think that you know what is represented by politics is not necessarily Dutch society in general. So I feel, and I definitely hope, that there's still a lot of Dutch people who see this and who see how the whole violence was framed, and who see that you know it wasn't the Muslims who instigated the violence, and can now also see through the framing of the media, and can see through politics.
Yeah. But how is it in terms of physically, practically? How are they providing policies or laws that will impact the Muslim community in Holland, like surrounding citizenship and things like that?
Yeah, so currently, because it has not been a really long time, there hasn't been any concrete law being made at the moment. However, there have been sort of suggestions of taking away citizenship of these Muslim people who have double nationalities. So a lot of people from Moroccan descent have double nationalities. So it has been proposed that people who were in these riots, that their Dutch citizenship being taken away. So I think that's quite shocking if you think about it, that these are not migrants, you know, these are like third generation Moroccan Dutch people who are, you know, in Dutch society, working in Dutch society, being educated in Dutch society. Many of them go to Morocco maybe a few times in their lives, or, you know, even if they do have a strong connection with Morocco still, they are born and bred in Holland, you know. So it's quite shocking that there are now talks of their citizenship being taken away and them essentially being deported to Morocco.
Yeah.
It's really concerning, especially thinking that they do consider this as their home.
Yes.
So they're not only facing how the politicians are framing them, and obviously they putting the blame on what they're doing and putting the full blame on them actually, but also living with that fear that everyone is just vilifying them. It's just a constant feeling of not belonging. That it's really
it's
troubling.
It's quite harmful to the whole debate around integration as well, because if you're going to constantly blame one group for all of your issues, and you're going to put them in this frame of, you know, you guys never integrate into the society, they're also going to have hostile feelings towards that society. You cannot expect them to then say that, oh, well, we're trying really hard, you know, because if you're constantly being told that you're never going to fit in, that at some point you're not going to try anymore.
I mean, I guess if you're, you know, if you are involved in violence and you know, whether it's getting involved in gang violence, you know, responding to hooliganism like the Tel Aviv match fans did, you know, if you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law at the end of the day, which should be punished. But the idea that the punishment will result in you losing your citizenship is something that's very disturbing in a way, because it's almost like the government and the society in political power is saying, well, if you make a mistake, we don't want you, we'll just get rid of you anyway, because we don't like you and we don't want you in our society, rather than actually just punishing them for any violence or any evidence of violence that they had carried out, which breaks the law, which is a completely different issue. If you break the law, it's understandable, you have to be punished for that.
Exactly, that's clear discrimination, because obviously it puts you at a disadvantage because of your ethnicity or background. So I'm just really troubled by this.
So I mean, going on to the Moroccan community, which you mentioned, they make up the largest proportion of Muslims generally in Holland, you would say. So they've been under quite a lot of scrutiny. What are the main concerns really about the Moroccan community, Muslim community in general in Holland, with integration and things?
I think currently what they're trying to pose as the main concern is that Muslims are fundamentally intolerant towards non-believers.
Okay.
So that's currently the big debate. which has resurfaced quite a couple of times, pretty much for the past like 30 years or something, 20 years. So yeah, I would say that's like the big issue right now.
The main one,
that Muslims are not able to live peacefully with people of other beliefs.
Yeah. Okay, fine. What I mean, we'll go into that, don't worry. You're just like holding on, like, let me speak now. We can talk about Quranic references and everything. No, I'm joking. No, don't worry. We will end up going into a bit more detail about that. But what's it actually like living in Holland as a Muslim woman? Because you're half Dutch yourself, like in terms of ethnicity. But obviously you wear a head covering, so you look Muslim. What's it like living in Holland as a Muslim woman?
Well, I mean, up until now, as long as sort of my rights and everything were protected, and I was, it's not like France where I'm not allowed to wear a head covering.
Yeah.
It was quite all right. It wasn't really anything that I felt that I was like systemically persecuted for being a Muslim. But at the same time, I think you get, especially if you wear a headscarf and you're quite vocally a Muslim, you get quite sensitive to how the debate about Islamophobia has been normalized in like the past couple of years, and sort of also the ignorance of many people regarding Islam. So yeah, I think you get quite an idea that in the past year it really shows that Dutch people generally tend to be ignorant towards Islam, and from that obviously comes just not understanding and then framing us for something we're not. So yeah, fundamentally, I can practice my religion in Holland, which I'm very happy about. That I'm able to do that.
Yeah.
But that's a fundamental right, and I really hope that won't be taken away from me.
Yeah.
But culturally, you can like feel certain shifts.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, given that, because I'm European as well, European background in the UK, living here and things, I feel like there's a lot of responsibility that kind of falls on the shoulders of Muslim women in that, rightly or wrongly, we have to try and kind of educate the wider population, the wider public about the true teachings of Islam, particularly when it's being misrepresented in the media, which so often is misrepresented because of the actions of a group of people or culture that comes into Islamic practice and things. Do you feel that? I mean, are you happy to do those kinds of things? I'm quite happy to talk about it and try and change people's perspectives on Islam and Muslim women in particular. Like, is that something you're happy to do, or is it something that you wish you didn't have to do? Or?
No. I always tell everyone around me, because I go to university. I have a big part of my family is ethnically 100% Dutch.
Yes.
So I always tell them that I'm very happy to answer any of your questions, and don't be scared that you're gonna offend me by any questions if you ask them respectfully.
Yeah.
So I've always sort of been very vocal about this, that please ask me something, because it's better than remaining ignorant.
Yes.
Because that's where the danger lies.
Yes.
So 100%. Please just do your research, ask me any of your questions.
Yeah.
And if you see me in a head covering and you go, why is she wearing a head covering? Just say that.
Just ask,
I'm very happy to explain. And I think that's also why we do like these lectures and these programs, to try and raise awareness about this. Because I think we do have an important responsibility. It is quite powerful that we wear a headscarf and that, we live a very religious life in a secular society. And so I do think we have a certain responsibility to show that it is compatible. And it's not only compatible, it's complementary.
Yes.
It's like our religion is complementary to us functioning well and, achieving excellence in society.
Yes.
So
Okay, fine. Noor, in terms of, I mean, maybe you can tell us a bit about your experience as well, being of a Syrian kind of background as well, and also wearing head covering. Everyone knows that you're Muslim. But also going into the idea that Islam is fundamentally like incompatible with Europe. Do you think that's like true?
Of course not. But I think it's, I'll first go into the point of obviously being a Muslim, having a headscarf. We are very visibly different in terms of when we put the headscarf. that definitely puts us in a group of the other. So when someone who doesn't have a knowledge about Islam sees us, the first thing is to have the ideas of what they've heard in media, what they knew from before. So I think I often find it, obviously, that I have to, whenever I get into a conversation, this is what comes up in even, I think maybe not the first conversation with someone, maybe the second conversation. It's like, why are you wearing a headscarf? What do you believe in? Why are you taking breaks to pray? And all of these small things. But I think that all stems from not knowing and just having to explore a bit more about you rather than what's the first perception and what you look like to start with. In terms of the Islam in general, I never think that it's a cultural difference issue. So I think I've lived in Ghana as well for some time, and I lived here. I'm originally Syrian. I've always thought that cultures can beautifully coexist, and it's mentioned in the Holy Quran as well, that Allah says in chapter 49, verse 14, "O mankind, we've created you from a male and a female, and we've made you tribes and sub-tribes that you may one another." That's the reason that we have been created in different cultures, so we get to know the difference between us. We get to know what's obviously the things that we can do better in ourselves, the things that we can learn from other cultures as well. So I never, ever think that it's cultural difference issue. I think it's definitely more to do with the policies, the governments. It might be also stemmed from not knowing, which can sometimes be the first barrier. But in terms of integration, I think it's definitely stems from the policies that the government have. So when we look at the neutrality policies in Europe now, which allows employees to ask women not to wear a headscarf, and obviously that's part of us. We do it because Allah has asked us to do this. This is part of who we are. And when you're doing that, you are putting a barrier for integration. You are putting a barrier for coexistence as well between the people that you have in your country. So yeah, I definitely think it's not an Islamic thing. It has nothing to do with Islam. Islam always teaches us to exist peacefully with each other and coexist and bring the best out of each other. And there's always more similarities than what we think in different cultures, but it definitely has to do with the policies and the politicians as well.
Absolutely. And what you were saying about the policies, this whole narrative that has now been built, that Islam or Muslims, it's like the other, or, it has been made really clear that we are not part of, the Dutch society in many ways. When for instance, the mayor of Amsterdam, she spoke about in an interview, it's a very subtle thing, that she spoke about the Jews of Amsterdam, but she spoke about the Muslims just generally, or like the Moroccans generally, which I think really shows how the underlying ideas are about Muslims. So even though so the mayor specifically, she has sort of accepted as well that the way it was framed earlier was not completely fair. But still, these subtle things in speech are quite important.
Yes.
If I may just jump in quickly, I really like the point where you're saying the Jews of Amsterdam, and that also put things in perspective.
Yes.
Why has that not come up before the Maccabi fans came up? Why there wasn't that conflict between Jews and the anti-Semitic Muslims?
I mean, there has been no structural issue with Muslims. There are many Muslims in Amsterdam, and there are many Jews in Amsterdam, and there's been no structural issue of Muslims attacking these Jews. But this whole narrative of like posing Muslims as the other, it does set like a dangerous precedent for how policies are going to be formed if this idea also revolves in general politics.
And thank you for watching. I hope we'll be able to see you on our next episode, but please do comment down below. Please subscribe and support the channel. Otherwise we'll see you next time. Peace be upon you.